Hello everybody and welcome back to another Doctor Who book review. It's that time of year once again to be taking a look at more new series Doctor Who target novelisations. In fact, in today's review I'm going to be taking a look at a number of Doctor Who book releases, including 5 brand new adaptations, 4 of which from new series Doctor Who, and the 4th being a 1980s Doctor Who serial. In fact, one of the last to feature Tom Baker as the 4th Doctor. So very much like last year, this video is going to be more of a presentation of the books themselves, taking a look at the excellent cover artwork by Anthony Dry and the overall presentation of the book. I will in fact also be doing separate reviews of a number of the books within this series because I have already read a few of them, including The Waters of Mars, Planet of the Ood and Kablam, and hopefully I will get around to the others in the future. As always with Doctor Who book releases, these books are available to order now from all good bookshops, as well as also being available online. So I was initially going to take a look at each target novelisation in broadcast order, but that's too boring, isn't it? You know what's coming next. So I'm just going to take a look at these targets in any order that I want. Starting off with Planet of the Ood, as written by Keith Temple, of course initially a 2008 Doctor Who story from Series 4. This was in fact one of 2 books within this wave that I was most looking forward to coming out, the other of which being The Waters of Mars. I do love a good Ood story, and I have actually read this one, and I will be doing a review of it shortly, separately, not a part of this video, to take a look at the narrative in a little bit more detail. Due to them being released in 2023, we now have the 60th anniversary and beyond logo being used, and it is no surprise that this works excellently within the target novelisation format. And why is it no surprise? Well, as you can see in the background of this very video, we have some of the original Doctor Who classic series target novelisations, and they adopt a very similar style of logo, featuring various weird and wacky colour palettes. So it is very fitting seeing Doctor Who return to a very similar logo, especially given that it is the 60th anniversary this year. The new series Doctor Who is no stranger to target novelisations with different logos, so here we have Twice Upon a Time from a few years ago. We also have what I think is a less effective use here on one of the more recent ones, the Eaters of Light from the 12th Doctor era. And as we all know, lack of consistency in artwork, logos and spines is basically one of the big selling points of the target novelisations, so it's not exactly a critique, if anything it's a massive praise. As well as being lovely and blue, we do also have some excellent embossing on this lovely golden finish, really making the Who stand out. Above this we have the BBC logo in a darkened black typeface, as well as Planet of the Ood in black and Keith Temple in red, again really standing out. Of course we have the compulsory target novelisation logo there, present in the corner. And as always, tilting the book onto its spine does reveal a lovely yet simplistic design. So the artwork for the Planet of the Ood cover is probably my favourite of the entirety of this wave. I love the way that it accumulates both the design from the TV story, but also some of the behind the scenes production art, the initial concepts for the Ood. Have a much more exaggerated, almost skeletal, skull-shaped design, and generally lots of those facial features are much creepier compared to what we got to see within the TV episodes. I love this darkened, sort of sunken effect within the face, really making the Ood's red eye stand out. All those various different creases and wrinkles around the face looking incredibly alien, really menacing. Even the Ood's tendrils are kind of oscillating, looking rather dramatic. Again, these have been really nicely detailed. We also have another Ood in the background there as well, looking rather similar to the one at the forefront of the piece. Look at this part here of the face. That lovely dotted effect nicely replicates the shading. It brings a lot of depth to the character, where that one of the Ood is wielding its translator orb there with energy coming off it. It's also quite possibly one of my favourite representations of David Tennant that Anthony Dry has achieved so far within this series. A really lovely side profile. Darkness of the piece of the reds and the yellows, but also this very threatening electric shock running around the entirety of the Ood is brilliantly contrasted with that vibrant blue and white of the Ood sphere. Also those subtle references to the traditional artwork of Chris Achilleos, where we have this lovely energetic design featuring these various yellows, oranges and pinks, and this also runs down the opposite side of the artwork too. This time some paler colours have been used. I think that it's a great background design. Although rather detailed, it still draws a lot of your attention to the main focus characters. Certainly by far my favourite thing about this cover art is the way that Anthony Dry has incorporated incorporated the initial concept artwork for the Ood into the TV appearance, and I also love the energy that this artwork has. It's certainly very threatening. I think that this really evokes the darker themes from this Target novelisation too. Some may argue may have been nice to have Donna within this artwork, but I think it works just as well by itself, and perhaps with the inclusion of Donna it would have been a bit cluttered. Flipping around to the back of the book now, again it is following exactly the same format to the other new series releases, including the air date of the story there at the bottom, as well as stating who plays both the Doctor and his companion. The top of the book also features a quote from the story in a lovely bold red typeface, as well as an isolated image of the 10th Doctor. As I have already mentioned, I have read this book, so very briefly discussing that, I will be releasing an extended review, so I take a look at the story in more detail, as well as the differences from the TV episode. It is a really fun read. It excellently represents the relationship between the Doctor and Donna. They're really brought to life. I love the way that it represents the struggles of Donna within this story, but also the Doctor fighting for the Ood's freedom. Of course, it digs into them a little bit more, their species, their likes, their dislikes, but also some really lovely commentary on how it feels for them to be possessed and the way that they can feel their mind being taken over with the red eye. There's also some excellent visual description of the Ood. It kind of expands upon their appearance and the various things that they can do to essentially track down their prey. So this book definitely makes the Ood actually quite a big threat, especially when they are possessed, but also the actual structure of the story is a really nice read. Every single chapter connects together really nicely, it flows very well, whilst also making the narrative kind of feel less clunky and less like it's been edited together, much like the TV episode. It gives the scenes just a bit more time to breathe. Next up, within the 2023 Target Novelisation series, we have the 13th Doctor story Kablam, as written by Pete McTighe from Doctor Who Series 11, certainly one of the stronger 13th Doctor episodes, and I was quite intrigued to see what Pete was going to do with this Target Novelisation, and if it would differ at all from the televised episodes. The logo really does stand out once more with that blue but also golden embossing, as well as the lettering beneath it. I do believe this is one of the only Doctor Who stories to feature an exclamation mark. So taking a closer look at the cover artwork for Kablam, I think that this is one of the best books within this wave when it comes to moving the techniques of the Target Novelisation series into the modern age. It's got those traditional concepts in there, but also at the same time looks incredibly modern. So I think that Anthony Dry has also done a great job of using colours that shouldn't really work together, but really do. So at the very bottom of the piece, we have this lovely explosion effect with a combination of yellows, whites and reds. Much like some of the other releases within this series, I like the way that we have this lightning bolt design separating the various components of the artwork. I like the way the 13th Doctor has been positioned on this piece. Yes, she is centre, but she isn't slap bang in the middle of the artwork. She's kind of down to the side, meaning the Kablam men are kind of hovering above her. In particular, with those glowing eyes, but also that height, I think it is a great representation of their presence within the actual TV story, because they are quite creepy. And credit where credit is due, I do like the way that once more Anthony Dry has used what appears to be a screen grab from one of the 13th Doctor's episodes, rather than simply resorting to the same set of promotional material of 13. The likeness has been excellently replicated here with that lovely dotted design. Of the fiery colours below, we have this very stark contrast of this lovely purple effect. Again, this is a colour that's not particularly seen on Doctor Who merchandise, and I think it works incredibly effectively here. And just to add some excitement to the piece, we also have some shooting stars in the top corner. Rather simple, but effective. Again, it's these lightning bolts at the bottom, the circular effect in the centre, and these little shooting stars off to the side that make the piece look rather comic book, but again harking back to the traditional Target Novelisation covers. All detailing on the face of the Kablam man is absolutely superb. Anthony Dry has done a great job here. I think the colouring in particular is complemented by the dots, but also the way that we have that shock of yellow, the vibrant white. It makes the piece look incredibly angular, really emphasising the various panels within the Kablam man's face. Same compliments also extend to the secondary Kablam man as well. This one is an ever so slightly darker colour palette. And finally, to finish all of this off, the Kablam delivery box has been excellently represented, incredibly intricate in design, even the Kablam logo around the side there with the delivery sort of icon. I really love this artwork. I think once again it's another excellent addition to the shelf and a great way of celebrating the traditional styles of the well-known Target novelisations, whilst also letting Anthony Dry do his own thing with these covers, which I think as each release comes out he's getting more and more comfortable and experimental in the way that he represents these stories. Flipping around to the back of the book now, again we have a continuation of that cream-based colour, making the text incredibly easy to read. Company information is confined to the very bottom. The recommended retail price for all the books within this series is £9.99, which is quite a big price hike compared to the old Target novelisations from back in the day, but hey ho, it's only to be expected. So very much like Planet of the Ood, I have actually had the chance to read Kablam. In fact, I got through Kablam in the space of an evening. I found it an incredibly easy read. The language flows really naturally and easily, and I got through this one very quickly, and that is someone who does in fact have a below average reading speed, so I was quite chuffed with myself. I think that overall the representation of Kablam within this story is really nice. It's really faithful to the TV episode, but also it digs into the inner workings of Kablam as an organisation, and it gives a few of the characters a little bit more to do. In particular, Julie Maddox, the head of people, we get to know a bit about her backstory, but also my personal favourite thing is that incorporation of the rise of automation within Kandoka and the people rioting in order to have jobs for organic people. And due to Pete McTighe being a massive Doctor Who fan, there is also lots of references in there as well, which I shall leave you to find out for yourself. But shaking things up a bit and delving into the world of classic Doctor Who this time round, the next book that I'm going to be taking a look at is Warrior's Gate and Beyond, as written by Stephen Gallagher. This is an interesting release because we have already seen Warrior's Gate have Target novelisation treatment many years ago, but it wasn't written by Stephen Gallagher. It's always nice for the TV writer to actually come back and have their own personal take on the story, as after all they are the ones that originally written the episode itself. But rather excitingly for Warrior's Gate, that is not all what we get. So flipping this book around to the back, we have in fact a few more things going on, including 2 additional stories. The book starts off as you would expect with an adaptation of the TV story of Warrior's Gate. This is in fact, I did check out of interest, this is roughly around the same length as a usual Target novelisation of around like 140 to 170 pages, but then we have the book being extended to include the Kairos Ring as well as the Little Book of Fate. Of course this is ever so slightly wider compared to your usual releases to compensate from the fact that this features more than just Warrior's Gate. 2 short stories that I do believe are roughly maybe 50 or so pages in length, 40-50, something like that, so you can get through them quite quickly, which I suppose expand on the world of Warrior's Gate. It's always quite nice, isn't it? It's a little bit creative. I suppose this book belongs to an exclusive club of Doctor Who Target novelisations to actually feature brand new adventures altogether that haven't been seen on screen. Warrior's Gate is quite an unusual one, isn't it? Because the vast majority of this episode is recorded on like the CSO background, and it's basically a white scape of nothingness. So how on earth do you replicate that on a Target novelisation cover whilst capturing that comic book style energy? The answer is lots of clouds, lots of smoke, lots of dots, and it makes for a rather interesting yet chaotic cover art. Current times, I think it is very easy to overlook artwork that have been fully created by a human, rather than having sort of filters applied over the top. Anthony Dry's artwork, each individual dot that you see here, he has done himself. It's not a filter, he's not just whacked an image of the 4th Doctor through a system and it's made it look all sort of dotted in design. He does this individually, and I think that the likeness is utterly superb. Again, replicating this older appearance on Tom's face, eyes are piercing. In particular, I love those details around his eye bags. Exactly the same situation with Lala Ward. I think that Lala Ward has a very unique face, and Anthony Dry has done a superb job of bringing this to life with these various dots. The background of the cover does at least have some suggestion of that white beneath. Of course, that is kind of lost within a sea of dots, as well as various yellows and reds. We have even more of this towards the opposite side, also seeing a few pinks in there as well. Circular kind of planets, stars, God knows. Above this we have one of the Tharals from the story, the main Tharal in fact. Again, a lovely authentic likeness here. A great use of pink has also been used to this red lightning bolt design as well, really drawing attention to this section of the artwork. And then at the very top of this we also have the spaceship from the story, which I think also looks a little bit like the parrot from the Pirate Planet. There's no K9 on this one, not a criticism, just a little bit of an observation. So yeah, overall it's nice, I like it. However, it's not my cup of tea, I think. I still respect the amount of time and effort that has gone into this from Anthony Dry, but just at the same time I don't think it's what I would expect from Warrior's Gate as a story. This is the brilliant example of making a Target novelisation look a lot more exciting than the TV story actually is. Or two things probably for this episode would have been simply doing a white abyss with the castle-like doorway, and then maybe the Doctor, Romana and K9 strolling towards it with one of the Tharals guiding the way, but that probably would look quite boring and wouldn't have got people to pick this book off the shelf, so I respect the artist for at least doing something different. There is a lot of nothing going on, lots of dots, lots of smoke, lots of fire, and I think perhaps the point of the piece does get a little bit lost. Fourth book within the series is The Waters of Mars, as written by Phil Ford, of course one of the 2009 Doctor Who specials to feature David Tennant as the 10th Doctor, and the penultimate story from his era. The original TV episode was written by both Phil Ford and Russell T Davies, so we just have one of the writers adapting this time round, and again this book does follow a rather similar plot to what is seen on screen, and this was in fact the first book from the 2023 range that I read. It was in fact the one that I was most excited for, so on the day that these books arrived I instantly started reading this one. The design is really nice, incredibly vibrant. You have the Doctor Who logo present at the top as well as all of the bold fonts, and as we flip around to the back we have a continuation of exactly the same design, a lovely write-up about the story itself. I quite like the composition of this piece. Again, it's utilised the location of the story as that focal colour in the background. Mars does in fact look incredibly lifelike for a Target novelisation, I think. It has a rather marbled appearance, which is really lovely. It's both the way that we have that little explosion towards the top, which I do believe is probably meant to represent the explosion of Bowie Base 1 at the very end of the story. Also have the brilliant Gadget, one of my favourite characters from the story, certainly as a kid. He's been really nicely designed, all the various components and appendages, the little syringe there at the very front. I do believe that this purpley texturing is meant to represent maybe ice fields or like sort of icicles dripping down the entirety of the artwork, although it's been given that purpley tint. That contrast between the lighter purple and the black, the block black, with that lovely projectile of water. I think that certainly when you compare this cover art to the other Target books released within this wave, it uses those more comic book styles to really capture the action of the story. In particular, these lovely vibrant white lightning bolts surrounding David Tennant. Choice of image for David Tennant on this cover is a little bit different to usual, and I like that. I like the variety. I like the fact that they've almost taken him from a moment within the episode rather than simply using a piece of promotional art that's been used over and over again. They very easily decided to opt for the spacesuit scene at the very end of the story as he rises up and he realises that he's the Time Lord Victorious, but no, instead he's gone for something a bit more serious looking, which have a slight suggestion of the spacesuit underneath there as well. And as for the Flood, once again these have been excellently represented here. Unlike the Planet of the Ood Target novelisation artwork, they have gone for a more direct reuse of the design of the... I think in this case it does certainly make sense, because I do believe the initial concept artwork for the Flood was quite different to what we actually seen within the story. Visual description that we get within this Target novelisation definitely brings this water possession to life, in particular that decayed skin around the mouth and the various cracks and things. It's a very unpleasant description that you will find out as you read this book. Is another really strong cover art. I think it is probably my second favourite of this series alongside Planet of the Ood. I think it nicely captures the action and threat of the TV episode. Initially, I must admit, I did want Adelaide Brooke on the cover art, but now I actually have this Target in hand, and although she is a very big part of the narrative, it makes sense to have the 10th Doctor and the Flood on. As a kid, this book would have really grabbed my attention, and it would have been a book that when I seen it in a bookshop, I would have wanted to grab it and read it. This is a brilliant Target novelisation. As I mentioned before, I have already read this one. Really looking forward to it because I loved this story as a kid. It's a really strong episode. And what I love about this Target novelisation is it takes the narrative on screen, adapts that in a rather faithful manner, but then also attaches brand new references and brand new scenes to make this book just as brilliant as the TV story, but also adding so many more levels to the TV episode. I think that all of the new references, all of the new scenes fit seamlessly into this book. It's as if those scenes have always been there. In particular, there is one of my favourite moments within the book is an expansion upon the scene where Adelaide reflects on her childhood and the Dalek confronts her, of course the Journey's End link, and the Dalek knows that she's going to grow up to become something big and important, a fixed moment in time. That's expanded upon into an entire chapter, and it influences the events kind of that are unfolding on Bowie Base 1. There's lots of tension, lots of high stakes. It digs into the Time Lord Victoria stuff a little bit more as well, the Doctor kind of going there to reflect, and there's also lots more references in there that don't appear within the TV story, so it really is a worthy read. I did really enjoy this one. I highly recommend it. It's one of my favourites, in fact, one of my favourite new series Targets that have been released to date. For the final book within the Target 2023 series, at least for now, of course we have the 60th anniversary adaptations coming out later this year. We have the 12th Doctor and Clara story, The Zygon Invasion, which was also titled The Zygon Inversion on screen as well. I believe this Target novelisation was originally meant to come out within last year's wave, but due to various reasons it didn't, so it's nice to see that this book has finally seen the light of day, and I've not read this one. I will hopefully get around to it one day. However, I can't really recall the actual TV story, and I would like to go back and watch that first, because then I feel like I will be able to appreciate what goes on within the Target book more. I will kind of be more familiar with the characters, but I will also actually be able to locate the new material, because I don't think if I read it now, I don't think I would have any idea as to what's new and what isn't, because I have such little memory of this story. As we turn round to the back, you guessed it, exactly the same design, very simplistic but effective. This story did of course originally air between the 31st of October and the 7th of November 2015. Bloody hell. I didn't realise it was that long ago. That is a surprise. But yeah, we also have a little quote there at the top as well. That has really stumped me. I didn't realise it was that long ago. God, we're getting old, aren't we? So zooming in more closely to take a look at the artwork for the Zygon Invasion, it's a rather basic one, but I think it's effective. I think that this one wouldn't look out of place with the earlier releases within the Target novelisation series of New Who. I might be wrong, not gonna lie, I'm filming this video whilst considerably tired, but I think that this might be a photo of Peter Capaldi from one of his later episodes from Doctor Who Series 10, simply because his hair looks a lot bigger than I can recall at this point within his era. I'm not complaining, I love these little inaccuracies on the Target novelisation covers. I think that this would have been quite an interesting one to do the dotted design for, simply because Peter has so many things going on with his face. Meanwhile, we have Jenna Coleman as Clara, surrounded by what appears to be fire. No wonder she's looking a bit worried. Again, a lovely likeness, but sadly I do think she is a little bit lost within the artwork. I think simply because the Doctor is somewhat framed within that circle. Lots of excellent examples of stark use of colour with vibrant yellows, oranges and greens. Have a rather grumpy looking Zygon off to the side. Lots of great details with his suckers there, really capturing that unusual sort of appearance that they have. Lots of lovely highlights of orange in there too. And then probably the secondary focal character of this artwork, we have a bigger Zygon just above this. He's looking a bit more questioning, isn't he? He's wondering what's going on with life. But again, a nice representation of the new series Zygons. I do quite like these swirls. I've got no idea what they are. They kind of look like a plume of smoke, emphasised with that lovely thick black line running around the side. I must admit, my memory of this story is basically non-existent, but I can remember Clara having a rocket launcher, someone parachuting from a plane, can't quite remember who, maybe the Doctor, probably. And then you had Kate Stewart and Osgood in there as well, all of which sadly isn't represented on this cover. I would have liked to maybe see some of that integrated a bit more, because I'm not quite sure that this represents the story as much as some of the other artworks within this series so far. It's still really lovely, and again, a great modern interpretation of a Target novelisation cover. I just may have wanted one of the Zygons swapped out for something else, and maybe a few more exciting things going on. I think as a kid, I wouldn't have had my attention drawn to this cover as much as some of the others. So there we have it, that is the Doctor Who Target novelisation releases of the summer of 2023. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for additional reviews of Planet of the Ood, Kablam and The Waters of Mars, digging into the narrative, the plot changes, and what I like and dislike about the Target novel adaptations of those stories. A little bit of a spoiler alert, but I did really enjoy reviewing these books. I think that they are a great escape, but also at the same time a really lovely way, especially as someone who grew up in the 2000s. These episodes did of course mean quite a lot to me as a kid growing up. I watched them religiously, so it's lovely to be able to experience the stories in a new way, which I think is always the joy of Doctor Who Target novelisations. Just seeing an episode from a different angle, or having characters expanded upon that maybe you've only seen on screen for a few seconds. So this is a really varied range. Hopefully I will get round to the Zygon Invasion and Warriors Gate in the future as well, who knows. But yeah, I do definitely recommend checking out the Target books. Some of the previous releases that have been really good that I've thoroughly enjoyed have included the likes of Rose by Russell T Davies, Dalek by Rob Sherman is an absolute must, and the Christmas Invasion as well is also a great release. I definitely recommend checking out those. So thank you very much for watching, hope you've enjoyed the video, have a nice day, I shall see you all next time.